Henrich Krummedige was born circa 1464 in Norway and died in 1530. He was a Danish-Norwegian nobleman and a member of both the Norwegian and Danish national councils, and played an extensive role in the politics of the era. He served as commanding officer of the Bohus Fortress in Norway from 1489 to 1503. Family and youth. Krummedige was Hartvig Krummedige's son by a second marriage. He is believed to have been born in Norway. In about 1493 he married Anne Jørgen's datter Rud, daughter of Danish National Councillor Jørgen Mikkelsen Rud of Vedby and Kirstine Erik datter Rosenkrantz. His nephew was era.He, son of Sophie Rud. Career. In 1484 or 85 he was knighted and entered service in 1487 at Bohus Fortress. In 1489 he was placed in charge of the strategically important Norwegian border defense, Bohus Fortress. At the same time he was elevated to serve as a member of the Norwegian National Council. The Krummedige-Tre-Rosa rivalry. The origin of the rivalry. Upon the 1448 death of King Christopher of Bavaria, who was Union King of Denmark, Sweden and Norway, the Norwegian succession resulted in controversy. In Norway the new king had to be elected by the Norwegian National Council. There were effectively two parties in the Norwegian National Council: the pro-Danish party led by Hartvig Krummedige and Bishop Jens of Oslo, and the pro-Swedish party led by the Archbishop Alsac-Bolt and Erik Simonsen. The pro-Danish party prevailed and Christian I of Denmark was elected king, although not without subsequent strife. Karl Knutsson invaded from Sweden and proceeded to Hamar, where he called a thing, and was elected king by Archbishop Bolt, Erik Simonsen and others who assembled there. King Karl proceeded to Trøndelag. He then returned to Sweden, leaving Simonsen as viceroy. Simonsen invested Akershus, which was held by Krummedige, who still adhered to Christian I. Ultimately Simonsen was killed by Krummedige. The leading pro-Swedish advocates fled to Sweden, and Karl Knutsson renounced his claim to the throne. Swedish forces again invaded Trøndelag in 1453, but were repelled and were forced to turn south across the Dovrefjell to Hamar, where they captured and occupied the bishop's palace. Hartvig Krummedige proceeded north, expelled the Swedish forces, and killed many of them. With this act, as well as his previous involvement in the death of Simonsen, he earned the enmity of pro-Swedish Alv Knutsson. Simonsen and Knutsson were members of the Tre-Rosa family, which title comes from the coat of arms, which includes 3 roses. Alv Knutsson had extensive holdings, over 276 farms in East and South Norway, and could bring substantial pressure to bear. He arranged that charges be brought against Hartvig Krummedige by one of the local farmers. As a result, Hartvig Krummedige lost all of his fiefs. Knutsson also worked through the Pope to obtain a papal bull concerning Krummedige's misuse of power. In spite of this dramatic setback, Christian I of Denmark restored Krummedige to Akershus by 1461. Hartvig Krummedige died in 1476, but his son Henrik remained a firm member of the pro-Danish party. The rivalry with the Tre-Rosa family virtually guaranteed this would be so. The rivalry in Knud Alvsson's time, when Henrik was elevated to similar positions in Norway as his father had held. He also inherited the family conflict with the Tre-Rosa family. Pro-Swedish Alv Knutsson's son, P. Knud Alvsson, of the family Tre-Rosa, was Lord of Giske, and Sigurd Jonsson's ultimate heir. Sigurd, the son of the Swedish nobleman John Martansson, was a Norwegian nobleman and knight, and the supreme leader of Norway during 2 interregnums in the mid-15th century. After the death of King Christopher in 1448, Sigurd Jonsson was offered the vacant throne of Norway, but declined. declined to pursue a claim. Alv was a royal councillor of Norway and holder of vast landed properties around Norway, having inherited land as well as a claim to the throne of Norway from his Giske-Bjarkøy-Sutrim ancestors. Knut Alvsson was personal enemy of Lord Henrich Krummedige and a member of the pro-Swedish faction on the Norwegian National Council. Knut took over Akershus in 1497. Knut Alvsson soon came into conflict with Norwegian peasants who killed his bailiffs and otherwise resisted him, until he petitioned Henrich Krummedige for support, since Krummedige had demonstrated his ability to work constructively with the local landowners. Krummedige not only failed to support, but informed the king of the matter. Knut Alvsson was relieved of his command of Bohus Fortress by Peder Gris, a Danish nobleman loyal to the king. In 1500, King Hans of Denmark, Sweden and Norway made an ill-fated attempt to conquer the Ditmarshes in northern Germany. Knut Alvsson, who had married the granddaughter of Karl Knutsson and was involved with the Swedish Independence Party, concluded it was time to act. Parallelly to a new Dano-Swedish war, his rebellion began in 1501 in Sweden, but soon came to Bohus Fortress on the Swedish-Norwegian border, which Henrich Krummedige commanded. Krummedige held his fief at Bohus, but Alvsson captured Akershus Fortress in March 1502. Although the citizens of Oslo remained pro-Danish while the nobles and bishops of the country remained neutral, presumably waiting to see which side prevailed, King Hans dispatched his son Christian at the head of forces. They relieved the siege of Bohus Fortress, captured and reduced Alvsborg Fortress across the river from Bohus Fortress in Gothenburg. Krummedige then led forces north to finish off the rebellion by recapturing Tunsberg Fortress and invested Akershus Fortress, which Alvsson was defending. When it became clear that the rebellion had failed, Alvsson came on board one of Krummedige's ships under a safe conduct. Krummedige killed Alvsson either by treachery or, as alleged by Krummedige, in response to Alvsson's own violence. Alvsson was judged a traitor and Alvsson's property was forfeit to the crown. Krummedige had prevailed, although Gazette reports he was compelled to leave Norway and the uprising was not totally quelled until 1504. The death of Alvsson was used to set an anti-Danish tone in Ibsen's play Fru Inga til Osterod, when he has Olaf's actival acclaim. Recall the afternoon when Henrich Krummedige came before Akershus Fortress with his fleet. The captains of the fleet offered to discuss peace terms, and, trusting a safe conduct, Knut Alvsson went on board. Only 3 hours later we had to carry him through the fortress gate. Norway's bravest heart was lost when Krumdige's minions struck him down. The rivalry in Karl Knutsson's time. Knut Alvsson had 2 sons, Knut and Erik. Karl Knutsson, the son of Knut Alvsson, continued the multi-generational interfamily quarrel. Karl found favor with Christian II and used the opportunity to slander Krummedige. On the basis of minor irregularities, Christian II removed Krummedige of the command of Varberg Fortress as well as of all his Norwegian fiefdoms. As a result of this, Krummedige transferred his support to Frederick I and worked for his election as the King of Norway. The conflict with Jensens Lunge. Danish-born nobleman Jensens Lunge married the daughter of Chancellor and Lord High Steward of Norway Niels Henriksen and his wife, the famous Inga-Datter. He was one of several notable Danes who acquired land, resided permanently in Norway, became nominally thoroughly Norwegian and founded new Norwegian noble families, which replaced the old nobility of the first rank. Henrich Krummedige and Jensens appear to have much in common. Both were Danish-born nobles, both supported the Lutheran Reformation, both supported Frederick I of Denmark, both were members of the Norwegian National Council, and both held extensive estates and other properties in Norway. They held another thing in common: ambition. At the 1524 meeting of the Norwegian National Council, the first meeting which Jensens attended and one at which Henrich Krummedige was not present, Roman Catholic Archbishop of Nidaros Olav Engelbrektsson and Jensens cooperated to force the newly elected Frederick I to accept a charter with terms designed to maintain Norway's independence, including, the king was not to impose taxes without the council's consent, the king was not to infringe on the Catholic Church's rights in Norway, and the king was to rule Norway only through native-born or married-in Norwegians who resided in Norway. The short-term effect of this charter was to enable Lunge, who had married into the noble Norwegian Roma family, to remain in place while Henrich Krummedige lost his fiefs and was de facto expelled from the Norwegian National Council. King Frederick I was clearly pragmatic in achieving what he wanted, and never came to Norway to be crowned. He honored the charter only when it was convenient. The Catholic Church was undercut, taxes were increased, and Danes continued to be placed in critical positions, and Henrich Krummedige regained his position on the Norwegian National Council in 1528. The Manstorp dispute sets up opposition to King Christian II. Although both Henrik and his father had a long history of strong support for the Danish kings, the Manstorp dispute placed Henrik in a new role as the king's opponents. Economic accomplishments. Krummedige was not only a nobleman with political skills and the tough-minded approach to accomplish difficult deeds, he was also an able investor, interested in commerce and industry. Krummedige inherited extensive landholdings, both in Norway and in Denmark, which he increased further through purchase and legal process. As a result, he was probably the largest Danish-Norwegian landholder of his period. In addition to inheriting approximately 240 farms, he invested the revenues from his Norwegian fiefdoms and purchased an additional 178 farms in Norway, with most concentrated in Bohus. In Denmark he increased his holdings by 300 tenant farms and 4 manors. Krummedige understood the value of maximizing the profit from his produce by selling it for the best price and participated actively in commercial trade, owning houses and commercial facilities in Bergen, Oslo, and Tønsberg in Norway, as well as Roskilde, the Gothenburg area, Halmstad, Malmö, and Copenhagen in Denmark. He also participated in foreign trade with his own vessels. His interests were not limited to agriculture and commerce. He may have run the earliest known copper mining venture in Norway, which was located at Sandsvær. The mine is mentioned in a 1490 letter from King Hans to Henrich Krummedige, and is the first written source that directly deals with a copper mine in Norway, mentioning our copper plant in Sandsvær. Although Krummedige and Poulsen were granted the mining rights, there are no sources confirming the mine was cost-effective. He was among the first who used water-driven saws for the production of large quantities of lumber in Norway and may have introduced them. He also constructed a large brick kiln capable of producing over 18,000 bricks at a firing on his estate in Manstorp final years. Krummedige died at Manstorp Skables in 1530 and is buried in the Vastrene in Gjelstad's church. His wife survived him by 3 years. With the death of his nephew, the male line of the Krummedige dynasty died out.